My name is Kylie, and I am 32 years old. Right now, I am staring at my phone, blocking yet another call from my parents as they beg to see their 8-month-old granddaughter. I never thought I would be the kind of person who would deny her parents access to their only grandchild. But every time I consider letting them back into my life, I remember how they chose my sister's friend over me for years. The friend who tormented me, humiliated me, and nearly destroyed my future. The friend they still welcome into their home with open arms. Am I really the bad person in this situation? Before I tell you this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you. Growing up, I thought I had the perfect family. My parents, James and Diana, my younger sister Madison, and me. We lived in a beautiful suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors. Our house was always filled with laughter, the smell of my mom's chocolate chip cookies and the sound of my dad's booming voice telling jokes during family dinner. My dad was a successful attorney at a respected firm in town. He worked long hours sometimes, but he always made time for family movie nights on Fridays and coaching my sister's soccer team on weekends. He had high expectations for us, especially when it came to academics, but he was also our biggest cheerleader. Whenever I brought home an A on a test or won a science competition, his face would light up with pride, and he would announce it to anyone who would listen. My mom was an elementary school teacher at the local public school. She was patient, kind, and always knew exactly what to say when I was feeling down. She had this special way of making even the most ordinary days feel magical. On rainy afternoons, she would build blanket forts in the living room where we would read stories and drink hot chocolate. During summer breaks, she would plan elaborate scavenger hunts around the neighborhood that would lead us to small treasures she had hidden. I was always the well-behaved, studious child. From a young age, I loved learning and could spend hours with my nose buried in books about science and medicine. While other kids my age were watching cartoons, I was conducting experiments in our garage or writing detailed reports about the human body. My teachers often told my parents that I was exceptionally bright, and I thrived on that praise, always striving to make my parents proud. Madison, 3 years younger than me, was different. She was naturally charismatic, outgoing, and effortlessly pretty. Where I had to work hard for good grades, things seemed to come easily to Madison. She was popular, athletic, and had a way of charming everyone she met, including our parents. I noticed early on that she could get away with things that I couldn't, like missing curfew or forgetting chores. Mom and Dad were stricter with me, expecting more, while Madison received endless second chances. Despite these differences, Madison and I got along well during our early childhood years. We shared a bedroom until I was 10, and we would stay up late whispering secrets and making plans for the future. I would help her with homework, and she would help me pick out clothes that weren't just practical, but actually cute. We had our own language of inside jokes and could communicate with just a look across the dinner table. Our family traditions were something I cherished deeply. Every summer, we would take a 2-week road trip to different national parks. Dad would map out the perfect route, Mom would pack delicious snacks, and Madison and I would compete to see who could spot the most license plates from different states. During these trips away from work and school pressures, my parents seemed more relaxed, and we felt like a perfectly balanced family of 4. Christmas was always magical in our house. Mom would go all out with decorations covering every surface with twinkling lights and festive ornaments. Dad would spend hours searching for the perfect tree, insisting it had to be just the right height and fullness. Madison and I would bake cookies for Santa, even long after we stopped believing in him, because some traditions were too special to outgrow. On Christmas morning, we would wait at the top of the stairs until both parents were awake, then race down together to see what Santa had brought. Birthdays were celebrated with equal enthusiasm. The birthday person got to choose their favorite meal for dinner and the type of cake they wanted. My choice was always spaghetti and meatballs, followed by chocolate cake with vanilla frosting. Madison typically chose tacos and strawberry shortcake. After dinner, we would open presents in the living room, saving the biggest one for last. School came easily to me. I was that student who reminded teachers about homework they had forgotten to assign and who always had her hand raised to answer questions. This earned me the nickname teacher's pet from some classmates, but I didn't mind. I was focused on my future goals. From the time I was 10 years old, I knew I wanted to be a medical researcher. I dreamed of finding cures for diseases and helping people through science. My parents, especially my dad, encouraged this ambition and often bought me books about famous scientists and doctors. Madison's social circle was always much larger than mine. While I had a small group of like-minded friends who enjoyed studying together and discussing books, Madison was friends with practically everyone in her grade. By the time she was in 5th grade, our house had become the gathering place for her friends. Mom would make snacks, and the girls would take over the living room with their music magazines and endless giggles. I didn't mind too much. I preferred the quiet of my room anyway, where I could focus on my studies without interruption. Everything changed the year I turned 14. Madison was 11 and starting middle school when a new girl named Amber moved to our town. She had glossy dark hair, designer clothes that none of the other kids in our small town had, and an air of sophistication that made her instantly popular. Madison was immediately drawn to her, and within weeks they had become inseparable. Amber started coming over to our house almost every day after school, and I couldn't help but notice how my parents seemed impressed by her poise and confidence. At first, I didn't think much about Madison's new friend. I was busy with my own life navigating the challenges of being a freshman in high school and preparing for important science competitions. But gradually, I started to notice that something wasn't quite right about Amber, at least not when it came to how she treated me. The first time I realized something was off about Amber was during a family dinner when my parents had invited her to stay. While she was charming and polite to my parents, answering questions about her family's recent move from Chicago and complimenting my mom's cooking, I caught her rolling her eyes whenever I spoke. When I mentioned my recent science fair win, Amber looked at Madison and smirked as if they shared some private joke at my expense. After dinner, as I was clearing the table, I overheard Amber whisper to Madison, "Your sister is such a nerd. Does she ever talk about anything besides school?" Madison giggled in response, and something inside me deflated. My sister had never made fun of my academic interests before. In the beginning, Amber's comments were subtle. When we passed in the hallway at home, she would mutter things under her breath just loud enough for me to hear, but too quiet for anyone else to notice. "Nice outfit, did your grandma pick it out?" Or, "Your hair looks extra greasy today." Small jabs that individually seemed harmless, but collectively started to chip away at my confidence. I tried to ignore these comments, telling myself that Amber was just trying to impress Madison and would eventually grow tired of being mean to me. Besides, I didn't want to upset Madison or create drama in the house. My sister seemed happier than ever with her new friend, and I didn't want to be the one to ruin that. As weeks passed, Amber became bolder. When my parents weren't around, she would criticize everything about me from my clothes to my love of science. "No wonder you don't have any friends," she would say, while Madison sat nearby sometimes looking uncomfortable but never intervening. "All you do is study and read boring books. Do you even know how to have fun?" One afternoon, I came home from chess club to find Amber and Madison in my room. Amber was holding my diary reading aloud a page where I had written about a boy I had a crush on in my biology class. They were both laughing, and when they saw me standing in the doorway, Amber didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Look who it is, the future Mrs. Robinson," Amber said, referencing my crush on Brian Robinson. "Do you really think he would ever be interested in someone like you? He probably doesn't even know you exist." I lunged forward and grabbed my diary from her hands. "Get out of my room!" I shouted, feeling tears threatening to spill. "You had no right to read that." Amber just shrugged and sauntered out, pulling Madison along with her. Before leaving, she looked back and said, "By the way, I sit next to Brian in English class. Should I tell him you're obsessed with him?" That night, I finally worked up the courage to talk to my mom about what was happening. We were alone in the kitchen preparing dinner while Dad was still at work and Madison was at soccer practice. "Mom," I began hesitantly, "I don't think Amber is very nice to me when you and Dad aren't around." My mom continued chopping vegetables without looking up. "What do you mean, sweetie?" I explained about the mean comments, the eye rolling, and the diary incident. To my disappointment, my mom simply sighed and put down her knife. "Kylie, I think you might be overreacting. Girls that age can be a little dramatic sometimes. Amber is probably just trying to bond with Madison and you're feeling left out. It's just harmless teasing." "But Mom, she read my diary. That's not teasing, that's invasion of privacy," I protested. "Well, you shouldn't leave private things lying around," she responded, somehow making it seem like it was my fault. "Besides, Amber has been so good for Madison. She's really coming out of her shell, making more friends. You know how shy she used to be." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother was dismissing my concerns and essentially telling me to deal with it on my own. It was the first time I felt that strange disconnection from her, like suddenly we were speaking different languages. As Amber's friendship with Madison deepened, I noticed my sister changing. The Madison who used to come to me for advice and help with homework now avoided spending time alone with me. She adopted Amber's mannerisms, her way of speaking, even her taste in music and clothes. It was like watching my sweet little sister transform into someone I barely recognized. At school, things got worse. Amber, despite being in a lower grade, had friends in the high school, including some girls in my grade. Suddenly, I started noticing whispers and giggles when I walked into the cafeteria. Anonymous notes were left in my locker with cruel messages. Someone started a rumor that I had cheated on a big exam, which wasn't true, but it caused several of my classmates to give me the cold shoulder. I tried to keep my head down and focus on my studies, hoping that if I ignored it, the bullying would stop. But it only seemed to encourage Amber and her friends. They took my silence as weakness and escalated their tactics. By the end of the school year, I was eating lunch alone in empty classrooms. To avoid the cafeteria, had stopped raising my hand in class, despite knowing the answers, and had developed anxiety about going to school. I had hoped that moving up to high school the following year would give me some distance from Amber, but I was about to discover how wrong I was. That summer before starting high school, I spent as much time as possible away from home. I volunteered at the local library, took advanced classes at the community college, and babysat for neighborhood families. Anything to avoid being in the house when Amber came over, which was nearly every day. Madison seemed to barely notice my absence, too wrapped up in her new social life with Amber at the center. When September arrived and I started my sophomore year of high school, I was filled with hope. New school, new beginning. Maybe things would be different now. That hope lasted approximately 3 days until I walked into the school courtyard during lunch and found Amber sitting with a group of juniors and seniors, including some of the most popular girls in school. My heart sank as I realized that despite being only in 8th grade, Amber had connections throughout the high school. Her older cousin was the head cheerleader, which gave Amber social currency that most middle schoolers could only dream of. As I stood frozen trying to figure out where I could go to avoid being seen, Amber spotted me. A slow, malicious smile spread across her face, and she leaned over to whisper something to the group. They all turned to look at me and then burst into laughter. That moment marked the beginning of what would become the worst year of my school life. High school should have been a time for self-discovery, making lifelong friends, and preparing for my future. Instead, it became a daily battle to maintain my dignity and mental health in the face of increasingly vicious bullying. What made it worse was that Madison, my own sister, began actively participating in Amber's cruel games. the cafeteria became a minefield. One day, as I was carrying my lunch tray to an empty table, Amber stuck her foot out, tripping me in front of everyone. My tray clattered to the ground, splattering food all over my clothes. The entire room erupted in laughter as I knelt to clean up the mess, hot tears of humiliation stinging my eyes. "Oops, sorry," Amber said with mock sincerity. "I didn't see you there. But then again, who does?" Madison was sitting at Amber's table that day. Instead of helping her sister, she joined in the laughter, high-fiving Amber as if she had done something praiseworthy. That moment cut deeper than any of Amber's direct attacks ever could. The rumors Amber spread about me became increasingly harmful. The worst was when she told people I had a crush on Mr. Harrington, our chemistry teacher. Mr. Harrington was young and popular with students, and I admittedly worked hard in his class because chemistry was crucial for my medical school aspirations. But Amber twisted my academic enthusiasm into something inappropriate. "Did you see how Kylie always stays after class?" she would loudly ask in the hallway. "She's totally obsessed with Mr. Harrington. It's so embarrassing." The rumor spread like wildfire, and soon even Mr. Harrington seemed uncomfortable around me. He stopped calling on me in class and kept our interactions strictly professional. I was devastated that my favorite subject had been tainted by this malicious lie. Social media became another weapon in Amber's arsenal. Someone created a fake profile using my name and picture, posting embarrassing content and sending inappropriate messages to classmates. I only discovered it when a kind senior showed me the profile and asked if I knew about it. The profile had hundreds of followers, including many of my classmates, who thought they were interacting with the real me. When I reported the fake account to the school administration, they said there was little they could do since it was created outside of school. The platform eventually removed it after multiple reports, but the damage was done. Many students continued to believe I had created the cringy content myself in a misguided attempt to be popular. Perhaps the most devastating incident occurred during my junior year when I was preparing for the state science fair. I had been working on my project for months, researching the effects of different natural compounds on bacterial growth. It was sophisticated work for a high school student, and my science teacher believed I had a real chance at winning a scholarship. The night before the fair, I stayed late at school to put the finishing touches on my display board. When I arrived early the next morning to transport it to the competition venue, I found my project in ruins. Someone had tampered with my bacterial cultures, contaminating them and rendering months of work useless. Worse, they had written crude comments on my display board in permanent marker. I knew immediately who was responsible. The previous afternoon, I had seen Amber lingering near the science lab after school. When I asked what she was doing there, she had smiled innocently and said she was waiting for a friend. I should have been more suspicious. With tears streaming down my face, I called my parents and explained what had happened. I expected outrage promises to confront the school administration, maybe even legal action, since this was clear sabotage of academic work. Instead, my father sighed heavily. "Kylie, are you sure someone deliberately ruined your project? Maybe it was an accident, or maybe your experiment just failed." "Dad, someone wrote 'Science nerd fails again' on my board. That's not an accident," I cried into the phone. "Well, do you have proof it was Amber? Did anyone see her do it?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already doubted my accusation. "No, but who else would do this? She's been torturing me for years, and you and Mom just ignore it." "That's enough, Kylie," my father said sternly. "I think you need to be stronger. The world isn't always fair, and you can't blame others for your setbacks. Use this as motivation to work harder next time." I was stunned into silence. My own father was essentially telling me to toughen up, rather than addressing the fact that I was being systematically bullied. When I got home that evening, my mother's response wasn't any better. "Honey, I know you're upset, but this kind of competition between girls is normal. When I was your age, I had a similar rivalry with a classmate. It taught me to stand up for myself." "This isn't a rivalry, Mom. This is bullying, and it's been going on for years," I said, my voice breaking. My mother looked uncomfortable. "Kylie, you've always been sensitive. Maybe if you tried harder to fit in to be more like the other girls your age." Her words trailed off, but the message was clear somehow. This was my fault. If only I were different, more like Madison or Amber, then I wouldn't be having these problems. That night, lying in bed, I felt truly alone for the first time in my life. The two people who were supposed to protect me, to be my advocates, had essentially blamed me for being bullied. It was a betrayal that cut to the core of who I was. In desperation, I sought help from my school's guidance counselor, Mrs. Bennett. She was a kind, older woman who seemed genuinely concerned when I described what had been happening. She called in Amber for a mediation session, but Amber played her part perfectly, appearing confused and hurt by my accusations. "I would never do such things to Kylie," she said, her eyes wide with practiced innocence. "I care about Madison so much, and I've always tried to be friends with her sister too. Maybe she misinterpreted my attempts at friendship." Mrs. Bennett, seeing no concrete evidence and faced with Amber's convincing performance, could only suggest that we try to communicate better and avoid each other when possible. It was a hollow solution that changed nothing. With no support from my parents or school, I retreated further into academics. If I couldn't stop the bullying, at least I could secure my future through scholarships and admission to a prestigious university far away from this town. I doubled down on studying, joined additional academic clubs, and volunteered at the local hospital to strengthen my college applications. My senior year brought the college application process. I poured my heart into my personal essays describing my passion for medical research and my dream of making a difference through science. My English teacher, who had become something of a mentor, helped me refine my essays until they perfectly captured my aspirations and experiences. 2 weeks before the application deadlines, I discovered that someone had hacked into my computer and altered my essays. Where I had written thoughtful reflections on my research experiences, there were now crude jokes and inappropriate comments. If I had submitted those essays, my chances of college admission would have been destroyed. I spent 3 sleepless nights rewriting everything from memory, terrified of missing the deadlines. When I confronted Madison about whether Amber had been involved, she exploded at me. "Why do you always blame Amber for everything? Maybe if you weren't such a stuck-up know-it-all, people wouldn't want to see you fail." Her words confirmed what I had long suspected. My own sister resented me and took pleasure in my suffering. It was the final crack in what little remained of our sibling relationship. Despite the sabotage attempt, I managed to submit all my applications on time. By spring, I had been accepted to several universities, including my dream school across the country. The full scholarship I received was my ticket to freedom, a chance to escape the toxic environment I had endured for too long. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for my future. The acceptance letter from Princeton University, with a full academic scholarship, was my golden ticket out of a situation that had become unbearable. I had hidden the letter in my desk drawer, taking it out occasionally just to run my fingers over the embossed letterhead and reassure myself that escape was coming. I had only 3 more months of high school to endure before I could leave this town and the people who had made my life miserable. My parents were proud of my achievement, of course. They immediately called relatives and friends to share the news. "Our Kylie got a full ride to Princeton," my father would announce, his voice swelling with pride. My mother started planning a graduation party, talking about inviting extended family and neighbors to celebrate. It seemed that in their minds, everything was perfect. They had conveniently forgotten or ignored the years of torment I had endured. When my mother suggested we invite Madison's friends to the graduation party, including Amber, I finally put my foot down. "Mom, Amber is not welcome at my graduation party," I said firmly during dinner one evening. My mother looked surprised. "But she's practically part of the family now, Kylie. It would be odd not to invite her when all of Madison's other friends will be there. I don't care. After everything she's done to me, I don't want her at my celebration. Madison slammed her fork down. You're still blaming Amber for every little thing that goes wrong in your life. When are you going to grow up? Little things? She read my diary, spread rumors about me, created a fake social media profile to humiliate me, and sabotaged my science project. Those aren't little things, Madison. My father intervened, his tone stern. That's enough, Kylie. We don't have any proof that Amber did those things, and holding on to grudges isn't healthy. This is supposed to be a happy time for our family. I looked from my father to my mother, searching their faces for any sign of understanding or support. Finding none, I quietly excused myself from the table, went to my room, and cried myself to sleep. They were so determined to maintain their image of a perfect family that they were willing to invite my tormentor to my graduation party. Despite my objections, my parents insisted on having the party, and yes, Amber was on the guest list. I decided to endure it for my own sake. One last hurdle before freedom. The party was scheduled for the Saturday after graduation at our house, with about 50 guests expected. The day before the party, Madison and Amber offered to help with decorations. I was suspicious, but kept quiet, not wanting to create more tension. I spent most of the day helping my mother prepare food, trying to stay out of their way. That evening, some of Madison's other friends came over, and they all gathered in the basement to watch movies, while my parents went out for a quick dinner with friends. Against my better judgment, I accepted a drink that Madison brought up for me while I was finalizing my thank you speech for the party. A peace offering, she called it. The drink tasted a bit off, but I was so focused on my speech that I didn't think much of it. Within 30 minutes, I felt strange. The room was spinning, and my thoughts became foggy. What happened next came back to me in fragments. I remember stumbling downstairs, finding the girls laughing and filming me with their phones. I remember Amber encouraging me to dance, to say things I would never normally say. I have flashes of falling, of being sick in the bathroom, of someone helping me to bed. The next morning, I woke up feeling absolutely terrible. My head was pounding, and I had no idea how I had gotten to my room. When I checked my phone, I had dozens of notifications. With growing horror, I realized that videos of me from the night before had been posted online. Videos showing me slurring my words, dancing ridiculously, and making a complete fool of myself. As I scrolled through the comments, tears blurring my vision, my mother burst into my room. Kylie, what is this? Your father and I are getting calls from everyone about videos of you drunk at a party the day before your graduation party. I wasn't drunk, I said weakly, my mouth dry and my stomach churning. I only had one drink that Madison gave me. I think something was put in it. My mother's expression hardened. Are you seriously accusing your sister of drugging you? This is a new low even for you, Kylie. You need to take responsibility for your actions instead of always blaming others. Before I could respond, a wave of nausea hit me, and I barely made it to the bathroom in time. My mother, rather than showing concern, just shook her head disapprovingly and left. As I huddled on the bathroom floor, feeling sicker than I ever had in my life, I realized something was very wrong. This wasn't a hangover from one drink. This was something much worse. My father drove me to the emergency room when I couldn't stop vomiting. The doctor looked concerned as he examined me and asked about my symptoms and what I had consumed. When I mentioned my suspicion about the drink, he ordered blood tests. The results confirmed what I had feared. There were traces of a sedative in my system, one commonly used to drug unsuspecting victims. Despite the medical evidence, my parents remained skeptical. In the hospital room, my father paced back and forth, his expression troubled. Maybe someone at the party spiked the punch and everyone had some. Or maybe you took something voluntarily and now you're regretting it. Dad, why would I drug myself the night before my own graduation party? That makes no sense. I protested weakly from the hospital bed. The doctor had recommended that I stay overnight for observation, so the party had to be postponed. When we returned home the next day, I was still feeling weak, but determined to confront Amber. I found her in our living room, with Madison acting as if nothing had happened. I know what you did, I said, my voice shaking with anger. The blood tests proved I was drugged. Why would you do something so dangerous? I could have died. Amber's face transformed instantly. Her eyes filled with tears and she looked genuinely shocked and hurt. What are you talking about, Kylie? I would never do something like that. How could you accuse me of such a terrible thing? Madison jumped to her defense immediately. See, this is exactly what I've been telling Mom and Dad. You're obsessed with making Amber the villain. You probably took something yourself to get attention and ruined the party because you were jealous that Amber was invited. My parents had entered the room during this exchange, and I turned to them desperately. You have to believe me. The hospital confirmed I was drugged. The videos online, the timing, everything points to Amber. She's been tormenting me for years, and this was her final act before I leave for college. My father looked between me and the tearful Amber, who was now being comforted by Madison. Kylie, he said slowly, I think you owe Amber an apology. These are very serious accusations without any direct evidence. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Direct evidence? What about the blood test? What about the years of bullying that you've ignored? What about the fact that Amber was the one who gave Madison the drink to give to me? My mother stepped forward, her expression stern. That's enough. You've ruined your graduation party with this behavior. I think you're just upset that the focus wasn't entirely on you for once. Amber has been nothing but sweet to this family, and this is how you repay her hospitality. I looked at my family, these people who were supposed to love and protect me, and saw them united against me. My sister smirking behind her fake concern for Amber. My mother choosing to believe a virtual stranger over her own daughter. My father, who had always preached about integrity and truth, willfully ignoring medical evidence because it was more convenient to blame me. In that moment, something inside me broke. A lifetime of seeking their approval, of trying to be the perfect daughter, of enduring abuse while they looked the other way. All of it crystallized into a single painful realization: they would never choose me. Not over the facade of family harmony, not over Madison's happiness, not over the charming, manipulative girl who had systematically destroyed my high school years. I walked upstairs without another word, packed a suitcase with my most essential belongings, and called a taxi. Princeton's summer program wouldn't start for another month, but I had saved enough from my part-time jobs to get a cheap motel room until then. Anything was better than spending another night under the same roof as people who had betrayed me so completely. As I waited for the taxi, my father found me sitting on the front porch with my suitcase. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded. "Away from here," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'll find somewhere to stay until college starts." "Don't be ridiculous, Kylie. Come back inside, apologize to Amber, and we can forget this whole mess." I looked at him, this man I had once admired above all others, and felt nothing but pity. "I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. And I'm not going to forget what happened, not just today, but for the past 4 years, while you and Mom ignored what was happening to me." The taxi arrived before he could respond. As I put my suitcase in the trunk, I heard my mother calling from the doorway, but I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see Amber's triumphant face or Madison's cold indifference. As the taxi pulled away from the only home I had ever known, I made a promise to myself. I would never again allow anyone to make me feel unworthy of protection and love, even if those people were my own family. The tiny motel room became my temporary sanctuary. With its faded wallpaper, lumpy bed, and temperamental air conditioning, it was far from ideal, but it was mine. Free from the emotional minefield of my family home, I could finally breathe. I spent those weeks before college working extra shifts at the local diner, avoiding places where I might run into my family or Amber, and preparing mentally for my fresh start. My parents called and texted constantly at first. Their messages evolved from demanding I return home to expressing concern about my safety to eventually trying to guilt me about the pain I was causing the family. Not once did they acknowledge that they had failed to protect me or express genuine remorse for choosing Amber's lies over my truth. I responded minimally, just enough to let them know I was safe, but not engaging in their attempts to sweep everything under the rug. Madison reached out exactly once. Her text read, "I hope you're happy with yourself. Mom has been crying for days and Dad is stressed about paying for Princeton now that you've alienated the family. Amber says she forgives you, though. You should come home and apologize before you ruin everything." I didn't dignify it with a response. The day I left for Princeton was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had arranged for financial aid to cover expenses my scholarship didn't take out small student loans, and lined up a work-study job in the university library. I was completely on my own for the first time in my life, but that independence, hard-won through pain and betrayal, felt like a precious gift. College life was initially overwhelming. The campus was enormous, the classes challenging, and everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged, except me. But slowly, I began to find my place. My roommate Zoe was a music major from Seattle who respected my space and didn't ask too many personal questions. The students in my advanced biology classes shared my passion for science and didn't care that I wasn't dressed in the latest fashions or familiar with popular culture references. For the first time in years, I could just be Kylie, the dedicated pre-med student, with a talent for research, not Kylie, the target of Amber's cruelty, or the disappointment to her family. It was like emerging from a dark tunnel into sunlight, disorienting, but warm and full of possibility. Financial struggles were a constant concern, while my scholarship covered tuition and basic housing. There were always unexpected expenses, textbooks that cost a small fortune, lab fees, a laptop when my old one finally died. I worked multiple jobs, often sleeping only 4 or 5 hours a night to balance work and academics. But even in those moments of exhaustion, when I was serving coffee at the campus cafe at 6 in the morning before rushing to an 8 a.m. lecture, I never regretted my decision to cut ties with my family. During my sophomore year, a flyer on a bulletin board caught my eye. Peer Support Group for Survivors of Bullying and Emotional Abuse. I stood staring at it for several minutes, my hand hovering over the contact information. I had never spoken openly about what I had endured, had compartmentalized those experiences as something to overcome rather than process. But something made me take down the number and eventually attend a meeting. The group met weekly in a cozy room in the student center. There were usually about 10 participants ranging from freshmen to graduate students, all with their own stories of betrayal and recovery. The facilitator, Dr. Harper, was a psychology professor who specialized in trauma and resilience. The first time I shared my story, I broke down halfway through. The emotion I had suppressed for years came pouring out in front of these strangers who nodded in understanding rather than judgment. When I finished, a senior named Taylor reached over and squeezed my hand. "It wasn't your fault," she said simply, "and you deserved better." Those words, so simple yet so profound, began a healing process I hadn't known I needed. Through the group sessions and eventually individual therapy with Dr. Harper, I began to understand the depth of the trauma I had experienced, not just from Amber's bullying, but from my family's failure to protect and believe me. What you experienced was a form of betrayal trauma, Dr. Harper explained during one session. When the people who are supposed to care for us fail to provide protection or even contribute to our harm, it damages our ability to form trusting relationships. But with work, that damage can be repaired. That work was painful and often left me emotionally drained, but I was committed to it. I learned techniques for managing anxiety, setting healthy boundaries, and identifying trustworthy people. Slowly, I began to open up to the possibility of meaningful connections again. My parents continued their sporadic attempts to contact me. On holidays, my mother would send care packages with my favorite homemade cookies and notes about how much they missed me. My father would call, usually late in the evening, his voice softening with what sounded like genuine remorse as he asked about my studies. But beneath their words, there was always a current of expectation that I would eventually come home, that I would forgive and forget, without any real acknowledgement of the harm done. During my junior year, I received an unexpected email from my mother. The subject line read, "Important family news," and I opened it with trepidation. The message was brief. Madison was engaged to her college boyfriend, and the wedding was planned for the following summer. My mother wrote that it would mean the world to Madison if I attended, that it was time to put aside old grievances for the sake of family. I sat staring at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to dismiss the invitation outright, but another part, a part that still yearned for reconciliation, despite everything, made me hesitate. I brought the email to my next therapy session. "What do you think would happen if you attended the wedding?" Dr. Harper asked, her expression neutral. I considered the question carefully. "They would act like nothing had happened. They would introduce me to distant relatives and friends as the successful daughter studying at Princeton, and everyone would think we're the perfect family. Amber would probably be there as a bridesmaid, and I would be expected to smile and play along with the charade." "And how would that make you feel?" "Invisible," I replied immediately. "Like my experiences and my pain don't matter. Like I'm only valuable when I conform to their expectations." Dr. Harper nodded. "Kylie, reconciliation is possible in many damaged relationships, but it requires acknowledgement of harm, genuine apology, and changed behavior. Has your family offered any of those things?" The answer was no, and we both knew it. I declined the wedding invitation with a brief polite email and sent a gift certificate to a home goods store as a wedding present. Madison never acknowledged either gesture. It was during a required humanities course that I met Nathan. He was a graduate student in bioethics who occasionally guest lectured for the professor. During a class discussion about the ethical implications of genetic research, we found ourselves on opposite sides of a debate, both equally passionate and well prepared with evidence for our positions. After class, he approached me with a grin and suggested we continue the discussion over coffee. Our coffee debate turned into dinner, which turned into regular study sessions in the library. Nathan was brilliant, challenging, and genuinely interested in my perspective on everything from scientific ethics to favorite ice cream flavors. He made me laugh for the first time in what felt like years, and in his company, I felt valued not for what I could achieve or how I could please others, but simply for being myself. For months, we maintained a friendship that teetered on the edge of something more. I was hesitant to cross that line, still carrying the wounds of past betrayals, and unsure if I was capable of the vulnerability that a romantic relationship would require. Nathan was patient, never pushing, but making it clear that his feelings went beyond friendship. One evening, after a particularly intense study session for my biochemistry final, Nathan walked me back to my dorm. Outside the building, he turned to me with uncharacteristic seriousness. "Kylie, I need to tell you something." He began, his voice steady, but his hands fidgeting with his jacket zipper. "I'm in love with you. I have been for months, and I understand if you're not ready or interested, but I couldn't keep pretending that I just want to be your friend." I stood frozen, a whirlwind of emotions making it impossible to form words. Fear, hope, affection, panic, all competing for dominance. Nathan misinterpreted my silence and started to back away. "It's okay. I don't want to make things awkward. We can still be friends if that's what you want." "No," I finally managed to say, reaching for his hand. "I mean, yes, I want to be friends, but I also want more. I'm scared, Nathan. I don't have the best track record with people I care about." "I know," he said softly. "You've told me enough about your family and high school to understand why trust is difficult for you. But I'm not asking for blind trust, Kylie. I'm asking for a chance to earn your trust day by day." That night, sitting on a bench outside my dorm, I told Nathan the full story of what had happened with Amber and my family. Not the sanitized version I had shared before, but all of it, every painful detail. He listened without interruption, his hand steady in mine, his expression alternating between anger on my behalf and compassion for what I had endured. When I finished, he pulled me into a gentle embrace. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," he whispered against my hair. "And for the record, your family was wrong. You deserved to be believed and protected. Always." In that moment, I realized that while my capacity for trust had been damaged, it hadn't been destroyed. With Nathan, I found the courage to be vulnerable again, to risk my heart, with the hope that this time it would be cherished rather than broken. Our relationship progressed slowly but steadily. Nathan was doing his PhD research while I completed my undergraduate studies, so we both understood the demands of academic life. We supported each other's ambitions, celebrated each other's successes, and provided comfort during inevitable setbacks. When I was accepted to medical school at Johns Hopkins, Nathan was the first person I called, and his genuine joy at my achievement confirmed what I already knew: he loved me for who I was, not what I could give him or how I made him look to others. When Nathan proposed during my graduation weekend, there was no hesitation in my yes. The ceremony was small, just a few close friends from college and Nathan's family who had welcomed me with open arms from the first time we met. My family wasn't invited. It wasn't out of spite, but self-preservation. I had built a new life based on mutual respect and genuine care, and I couldn't risk having that contaminated by the toxic dynamics of my past. As Nathan and I exchanged vows in a sunlit garden on campus, I felt a sense of peace and rightness that had eluded me for so long. I had found my family of choice people who valued me for exactly who I was. And while there would always be a small, sad space in my heart for the family I had lost, I no longer felt defined by that loss. 5 years into my career as a medical researcher at a prestigious laboratory, life had settled into a satisfying rhythm. Nathan and I had bought a small but charming house near the hospital where I conducted my research on autoimmune diseases. He had completed his PhD and was now teaching bioethics at the local university. We had built a life together based on mutual respect, shared goals, and a deep understanding of each other's needs. My work was challenging and fulfilling. My team had recently published a groundbreaking paper on new treatment approaches for lupus, earning recognition in the medical community and securing additional funding for our research. After years of hard work and determination, I had finally achieved the career I had dreamed about since childhood. Social media had become a necessary evil in professional networking, so I maintained a carefully curated LinkedIn profile and a private Instagram account where I occasionally shared photos of our travels and professional milestones. It was through these platforms that my parents had managed to keep tabs on my life, despite our minimal direct contact over the years. The phone calls and emails had become less frequent as time passed. On my birthdays, my mother would send a card with a brief note. During major holidays, my father would leave a voicemail wishing me well. I would respond with equally brief messages, maintaining the most basic connection without opening the door to deeper involvement. It was a delicate balance, acknowledging our biological connection while protecting my emotional well-being. When I discovered I was pregnant, Nathan and I were overjoyed. We had been discussing starting a family, and while the timing was a bit sooner than planned, we felt ready for this new adventure. I was 31 years old, established in my career, and married to a man who I knew would be an excellent father. As my pregnancy progressed and we prepared for our child's arrival, I found myself reflecting more on my own family history. The nursery we were painting, the lullabies I practiced singing, the tiny clothes we folded and put away, all triggered memories of my own childhood, the good parts before Amber entered our lives. I thought about my mother singing to me when I had nightmares, my father teaching me to ride a bike, Madison and I making up elaborate stories with our dolls. These reflections stirred complicated emotions. I had spent years in therapy processing the trauma of my adolescence and the betrayal by my family, but I hadn't fully addressed the grief of losing the positive aspects of those relationships. As I prepared to become a mother myself, I wondered what kind of parent I would be, what lessons I would carry forward, and which patterns I would break. During my second trimester, Nathan came home one evening to find me crying over an old photo album I had unearthed from the back of our closet. It contained pictures from before the estrangement family vacations, birthday celebrations, school events. He sat beside me gently, placing his hand on my growing belly. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked softly. I wiped my tears and tried to articulate the swirl of emotions I was feeling. "I'm going to be someone's mother soon. I'm going to make promises to our child, promises to protect them, to always be on their side. And it makes me think about the promises my parents broke. But it also makes me think about the good times, and I wonder if I'm making a mistake by keeping them out of our lives." Nathan listened thoughtfully before responding. "Kylie, you've never made decisions out of spite or anger. You've always done what was necessary for your own well-being. But circumstances change, people change, and it's okay if your boundaries change too. What do you feel would be right for you and for our baby?" It was a question I couldn't answer immediately. Over the following weeks, I discussed it with my therapist, journaled about my feelings, and tried to imagine different scenarios for how my parents might be involved in my child's life. The thought of introducing them to my baby filled me with both hope and anxiety. What if they undermined me as a parent? What if they brought up painful memories? What if they still maintained a relationship with Amber? I hadn't posted about my pregnancy on social media, preferring to keep this intimate journey private. But somehow, perhaps through mutual acquaintances or simply by noticing changes in the few photos I did share, my mother found out. One afternoon, I received an email with the subject line, "Congratulations on your pregnancy." The message was cautiously joyful, expressing happiness about becoming a grandmother, and hope that this new chapter might open the door to reconnection. There was no explicit apology for the past, but there was an acknowledgement that mistakes had been made and that she and my father had done a lot of thinking over the years. I showed the email to Nathan, uncertain how to respond. "Do you want to reach out to them?" he asked. After much consideration, I decided to take a small step. I responded to my mother's email with a brief but cordial message confirming the pregnancy and thanking her for the good wishes. I didn't make any promises about future contact, but didn't close the door either. It was a tiny crack in the wall I had built to test to see what might come through. What followed was a cautious exchange of emails. My mother shared updates about her life. She had retired from teaching, and my father's, he was now a partner at his law firm. She mentioned that Madison had 2 children, a boy and a girl, making me an aunt. I had never met my niece and nephew. She was careful not to pressure me, but made it clear they would welcome more connection if I was open to it. As my due date approached, the emails became more frequent. My mother offered advice about pregnancy and childbirth, sharing stories from when she was expecting me. Some part of me, perhaps the part that was now understanding the fierce protectiveness of motherhood, began to soften toward her. But the rational part of me remained wary, remembering how easily she had dismissed my pain in the past. When our daughter, Eliza Rose, was born on a snowy February morning, the joy was overwhelming. Holding her tiny body against my chest, looking into her unfocused eyes, I felt a love so powerful, it took my breath away. Nathan and I spent those first days in a bubble of exhaustion and wonder, learning our daughter's needs and marveling at her perfect fingers and toes. A week after Eliza's birth, a large package arrived at our door. Inside was a beautiful handmade quilt, clearly crafted with great care and time. The card read, "For our precious granddaughter, Eliza. Made with love, Grandma and Grandpa." My hands trembled as I ran them over the intricate stitching, trying to process the emotions this gesture evoked. Nathan found me sitting on our bed, holding the quilt and crying. "We need to make a decision," I said quietly. "They know about Eliza now. They're going to want to meet her, and I don't know if I'm ready for that." After much discussion, we decided that I would meet with my parents alone first in a neutral location before making any decisions about introducing them to Eliza. I needed to gauge their understanding of the past, their current attitudes, and whether they could respect the boundaries I would need to establish. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. Walking into that meeting was one of the hardest things I had ever done. My parents looked older than I remembered my father's hair, now completely gray. My mother's face lined with age. They stood awkwardly when they saw me, clearly unsure whether to attempt a hug. I resolved the moment by extending my hand for a formal handshake, which they accepted with visible disappointment. The conversation was strained at first, filled with small talk about the weather and my journey there. But eventually, we had to address the elephant in the room. I took a deep breath and spoke the words I had rehearsed. "Before we discuss any relationship moving forward, I need to know if you understand why I left and why I've kept my distance all these years." My father cleared his throat, his legal training evident in his measured response. "We understand that you felt we didn't support you during a difficult time with Amber. We should have listened more carefully to your concerns." It was an acknowledgement, but not quite an apology. I pressed further. "Do you understand that what happened wasn't just a difficult time, but years of systematic bullying that culminated in me being drugged? Do you understand that by choosing to believe Amber over me, you betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Kylie, we didn't realize the extent of what was happening. We thought it was just typical teenage conflict. We never wanted you to be hurt." "But I told you repeatedly what was happening and you dismissed it. You told me to be stronger to fit in better. You blamed me for being bullied." My father looked down at his coffee cup. "We made mistakes, serious ones. At the time, it seemed easier to maintain peace in the household than to confront the possibility that Madison's best friend was deliberately harming you. That was wrong, and we've regretted it deeply as we've come to understand what really happened." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the damage they had caused, but it was more than I had ever received from them before. Still, I needed to know one more crucial piece of information. "What about Amber? Is she still in your lives?" My parents exchanged glances before my mother answered. "Amber is still Madison's friend. She was the maid of honor at Madison's wedding, and she's the godmother to Madison's daughter." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, Amber remained embedded in my family. Any relationship with my parents would potentially bring me back into contact with the person who had systematically destroyed my adolescence. "I can't have Amber anywhere near my daughter," I said firmly. "Not ever." "We understand that," my father said quickly. "We would never expect you to interact with her. If we were to visit you, it would be just us, no one else." "And what about family gatherings, holidays? Would you exclude Amber for those too, or would you expect me to just avoid those occasions?" They didn't have a clear answer, which told me everything I needed to know. They were willing to make surface-level accommodations, but not to fundamentally reorganize their family relationships, even for the sake of reconciliation with me. As the meeting ended, they asked if they could see pictures of Eliza. I showed them a few on my phone, watching their faces soften with genuine emotion as they looked at their granddaughter for the first time. My mother asked when they might be able to meet her, her voice hopeful. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I need time to process this conversation and discuss it with Nathan. If we do allow visits, there would need to be clear boundaries and a gradual approach." They nodded, clearly disappointed but seemingly understanding. As we parted ways, my mother hesitantly reached out for a hug, which I allowed briefly before stepping back. It felt strange to be held by her after so many years, a mixture of comfort and unease that I couldn't quite reconcile. When I returned home, Nathan was waiting with Eliza in his arms. He listened carefully as I recounted the meeting, neither encouraging me one way or another, but supporting me in sorting through my complex feelings. In the weeks that followed, my parents called and emailed regularly, asking about Eliza's development and gently inquiring about a possible visit. I maintained polite but distant communication, still uncertain about the right course of action. The decision came to a head when my mother called one evening, her voice breaking as she spoke. "Kylie, your father has been diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer. The prognosis is good, but it's made us both realize how precious time is. We don't want to waste any more years being estranged from you and missing our granddaughter's childhood. Please, can we find a way forward?" That call triggered a flood of emotions, concern for my father's health guilt about potentially denying Eliza a relationship with her grandparents, anger that it took a health crisis to elicit what felt like genuine remorse. I discussed it with Nathan and my therapist, weighing all aspects of the situation. Finally, I called my parents with my decision. "You can visit, but there are conditions. The visits will be at our house, supervised by both Nathan and me. They will be short at first, no more than an hour or two. There will be no discussion of Amber, and if Madison visits, she comes alone without her friend. And most importantly, if at any point I feel that old patterns are emerging, if you undermine me as Eliza's mother, or dismiss my concerns about anything, the visits will stop immediately." They agreed to my terms without hesitation. 2 weeks later, they came to our home bearing gifts for Eliza and walking on eggshells around me. The visit was awkward but civil, with my father holding Eliza tentatively and my mother taking dozens of pictures. When they left, I felt emotionally drained but not regretful. We established a pattern of monthly visits, gradually extending the time as my comfort level increased. My father's cancer treatment was successful, and as his health improved, so did our cautious rebuilding of a relationship. It was nothing like the close family bond I had once envisioned, but it was a carefully constructed bridge across the chasm that had separated us for so long. Madison reached out after several months, asking if she could bring her children to meet their cousin. I agreed on the condition that we meet at a public park without Amber present. The reunion with my sister was tense, years of hurt and resentment simmering beneath polite conversation. But watching our children play together stirred something in both of us, a reminder of the closeness we had once shared before Amber came between us. As we sat on a park bench, Madison unexpectedly said, "I'm sorry, Kylie. I should have stood up for you. I was so caught up in being friends with the popular girl that I didn't see what it was costing you." I didn't want to believe Amber could be that cruel, because it would mean I had chosen the wrong person to be loyal to. It wasn't a complete healing of our relationship, but it was a start. We began to text occasionally, sharing pictures of our children and cautiously rebuilding a connection that had been severed for over a decade. As I sit in the nursery rocking Eliza to sleep after her evening bottle, I find myself reflecting on the journey that brought me here. The pain of my adolescence, the betrayal by my family, the long road to healing, and now this tentative rebuilding of relationships on my own terms. It hasn't been easy, and there are still moments when old wounds feel fresh, when a certain look or comment from my mother triggers memories of past dismissals. The past 8 months with Eliza have taught me more about love and protection than all my years of therapy combined. Looking into her innocent face, I understand with crystal clarity why my parents' failure to protect me was so devastating. I would move mountains to keep my daughter safe, would believe her without question if she came to me in pain, would confront anyone who threatened her well-being, regardless of the social consequences. The fact that my parents couldn't do the same for me still hurts a dull ache that may never completely fade. Nathan has been my rock throughout this complex process of reconnection. He watches my parents carefully when they visit, ready to intervene at the slightest sign that they are overstepping or causing me distress. His protective instinct matches my own, not just for Eliza, but for me as well. In his steady presence, I find the security I never had growing up. My relationship with my parents remains a work in progress. There are good visits where we focus on Eliza and create new positive memories. There are difficult conversations where we cautiously navigate the minefield of the past, sometimes making progress, sometimes retreating to safer ground. They are trying. I can see that now. My father has even started seeing a therapist to work through his own patterns of emotional avoidance, a step I never thought he would take. Madison and I text regularly now and occasionally meet for coffee when she's in town. Our relationship will never be what it might have been without Amber's influence, but we're finding a new way to be sisters as adults, connected by our shared childhood memories and our love for our children. She has admitted that her friendship with Amber has cooled in recent years, especially after Amber made some unkind remarks about Madison's weight gain after pregnancy. It seems that without me as a target, Amber's true nature became more apparent to my sister. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single decision, but a daily practice. Some days, I can look at my parents with my daughter and feel only gratitude that Eliza has grandparents who adore her. Other days, a casual comment or dismissive gesture will trigger old pain, and I have to consciously choose to stay present rather than retreat behind my protective walls. The hardest lesson has been that healing doesn't mean forgetting. I will never forget what happened to me, how isolated and betrayed I felt during those formative years. But I've learned that I can acknowledge that pain without letting it dictate my future or my daughter's relationship with her extended family. I've learned to set boundaries that protect my well-being while still allowing for connection. I've also come to understand that my parents' failure wasn't entirely about me. They had their own limitations, their own blind spots, their own inability to confront uncomfortable truths that might disrupt their image of a perfect family. This doesn't excuse their choices, but it helps me see them as flawed humans rather than deliberately malicious actors in my story. In my professional life, I've found another way to transform my pain into something meaningful. I volunteer with a local organization that works to prevent bullying in schools, sharing my story with educators and parents to help them recognize the signs and understand the lasting impact of their response. If my experience can help even one child receive the support and protection I didn't get, then something positive has emerged from those difficult years. Nathan and I are discussing having another child, expanding our family, and creating more of the love and security we've built together. When I think about Eliza potentially having a sibling, I'm determined that they will have the close, supportive relationship that Madison and I might have had under different circumstances. I will teach them to stand up for each other, to be each other's fiercest advocates in a world that can sometimes be unkind. My journey from victim to survivor to thriver hasn't been linear. There have been setbacks, moments of doubt, times when I questioned whether maintaining any relationship with my family was worth the emotional cost. But as I look at my sleeping daughter, her tiny hand curled around my finger, I know that I've made the right choices for myself and for her. I've learned that sometimes forgiveness isn't about excusing what was done to you, but about freeing yourself from the weight of carrying that pain day after day. I've learned that love doesn't have to be unconditional to be real, that healthy relationships require boundaries and mutual respect. Most importantly, I've learned that the cycle of dismissal and betrayal that marked my childhood doesn't have to continue into Eliza's life. With each gentle word, each attentive response to her needs, each promise kept, I am creating a different legacy for my daughter. As I place Eliza in her crib, watching her peaceful sleep, I make the same promise I've made every night since she was born. I will always believe you. I will always protect you. I will always be on your side. It's a promise I intend to keep no matter what challenges the future may bring. Sometimes the families we're born into fail us in profound ways. But if we're lucky, we can create new families, chosen ones built on love and respect rather than obligation and appearances. And sometimes, if we're very lucky and do a lot of hard work, we can find a way to heal the broken relationships of our past, not by pretending the breaks never happened, but by carefully mending them with clear eyes and strong boundaries. In the end, I'm grateful for the journey, difficult as it was. It led me to Nathan, to my career, to Eliza, and eventually to a sense of peace that I once thought impossible. The scared, betrayed girl I once was has become a strong, confident woman who knows her worth and isn't afraid to stand up for it. And that perhaps is the most valuable lesson of all. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who failed to protect you? What helped you make that decision? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories of healing and growth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that you deserve to be believed and protected always. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that message today.